then asks why they have come and how he can please them. The thing that he told is like, normally their coming is a special mercy on wherever these exalted devotees go, 4 Kumaras. And then he asked a question to them that, therefore I ask you, well-wishers or Shruda, by what means will there be benefit, Kshema, for those suffering in this world? So after praising a little bit Prithu Maharaj, then they start answering, the 4 Kumaras start answering the question. Basically, I think it's Sanat Kumar who starts answering the question. And what he says, the only cause of benefit or kshema, hetu, for human society has been conclusively established in the scriptures as detachment from the bodily concept and attachment or rati to the Lord. So those two things he mentions in verse number 21. And from verse number 22 to up to 36, there is a description of Jnana Mishrita Bhakti. So, with predominance of Bhakti culminating in Shantarati, that is what is described. So, in the 22nd verse, there is a description that how one could be attached to the Lord and detached from the body, how it can be developed. It says all the positive things that to do. And last week, the verse we have taken, 23rd verse, it tells about what not to do to preserve that consciousness or that practice. Now, in this verse, it is saying, again, continuing in that same line, what is the criteria for spiritual advancement? What different characteristics helps one to advance spiritually? Because that was a question asked by Prithu Maharaj. Please tell us something which is of ultimate benefit for all of us. And then let's recite this verse with that background. Ahimsaya parahamsya charyaya.
Ahimsaya parahamsya charyaya.
Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna.
Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna.
Yamair kamair niyamaishchapya nindaya.
Yamair akamair niyamaishchapya nindaya.
Nihaya dvanda titikshaya cha.
Nirihaya dvandva titikshaya cha.
One more time. Ahinsaya parahamsya charyaya.
Ahimsaya parahamsya charyaya.
Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna.
Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna.
Yamair kamair niyamaishchapya nindaya.
Yamair akamair niyamaishchapya nindaya.
Ihaya titikshaya cha.
Nirihaya dvandva titikshaya cha.
Ahinsaya parahamsya charyaya.
Ahimsaya paramahamsya charyaya.
Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna.
Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna.
Yamair kamair niyamaishchapya nindaya.
Yamair akamair niyamaishchapya nindaya.
Ihaya dvanda titikshaya cha.
Nirihaya
dvanda titikshaya cha.
Thank you. Please recite.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Please.
Ahimsaya paramahamsya charyaya.
Ahimsaya
paramahamsya charyaya.
Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna.
Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna.
Yamair akamair niyamaishchapya nindaya.
Yamair kamair
Niyamaishchapya nindaya.
निरीहया द्वन्द्वतितिक्षया च
निरीहया द्वन्द्वतितिक्षया च.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I can try. Ahimsaya paramhamsaya charyaya
Ahimsaya paramahംस्य चर्यया
smritya mukunda charitagrasin sidhuna
स्मृत्या मुकुन्दा चरिताग्रसीधुना
yamera akamera niyameschapya nindaya
नियमैश्चाप्यनिन्दया
nirihaya dvand titikshaya cha.
निरीहया द्वन्द्वतितिक्षया च.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Anybody else response to this, right?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, please.
Ahinsaya paramahansa charyaya
Ahimsaya
paramhamsa charyaya
Mritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna
smritya mukunda
चरिताग्रसीधुना
charitagrasidhuna
Yamera kamera niyamaischapya nindaya
नियमैश्चाप्यनिन्दया
Nirihaya dvanda titikshaya cha
Thank you, Mataji. So let's discuss this verse. So ahimsaya is, as everybody knows, one of the characteristics of our spiritual advancement is by non-violence attitude. Parahamsya charya. Paramahansa archaya means whatever path they are following, one has to go in that path. Paramahansa acharyas, following their footsteps is what is being expressed. So that is another way to advance spiritually. Smritya mukunda charitagrasidhuna. Smritya, what smriti? Mukunda charita. Charita of Mukunda, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his activities. Agriya. Sidhuna, nectar of that. And that nectar one is thinking about or relishing. So that is another parameter. Then yamai akamai. Yamai means the controlling of the senses, or one can say following regulative principles. Akamai, having no material desires. Niyamai, again, niyamai is again following regulative principles is there. Chapi anindaya. So, and plus cha api anindaya. No blasphemy or no like what you say, without any blasphemy. No ninda of anyone. Nirihaya. Nirihaya is actually, Niriha means a person who is totally simple-hearted. And so Nirihaya means having simple attitude towards living. Simple living and high thinking, that's what comes here. Dvanda titikshayacha. When there is dualities in life, sukha and dukkha, or labha and hani, that time, dvanda, that those titikshaya means to tolerate those dvandas. So these are the qualities for spiritual advancement, and by developing those qualities, the attachment to the Lord and detachment from the body can be developed. So let's read the translation.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
A candidate for spiritual advancement must be non-violent, must follow in the footsteps of great acharyas, must always remember the nectar of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, must follow the regulative principles without material desire, and while following the regulative principles, should not blaspheme others. A devotee should lead a very simple life and not be disturbed by the duality of opposing elements. He should learn to tolerate them. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So here, just see the word must use of must so many places. Must be non-violent. Must follow. It means there is no option. One has to do it. Must follow the footsteps of great acharyas. And then there is yamai here. Yamai akamai has been put together here, saying must follow regulative principle without material desire. And then again, there is regulative principle here. Niyamaish chapi anindaya. So both these together here is described. While following the regulative principle, should not blaspheme others. These both are combined. So a devotee should lead a very simple life, nirihaya, and not be disturbed by the dualities of the opposing element. He should learn to tolerate them. Dvanda titikshaya. So let's read the purport. It's a big purport. So, and it's self-explanatory. Each term is very nicely explained by Srila Prabhupada. Please. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
The devotees are actually saintly persons or sadhus. The first qualification of a sadhu or devotee is ahimsa or non-violence. Persons interested in the path of devotional service or in going back home, back to Godhead, must first practice ahimsa or non-violence. A sadhu is described as titikshava karunikaha. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-21. A devotee should be tolerant and should be very much compassionate toward others. For example, if he suffers personal injury, he should tolerate it. But if someone else suffers injury, the devotee need not tolerate it. The whole world is full of violence, and a devotee's first business is to stop this violence, including the unnecessary slaughter of animals. A devotee is the friend not only of human society but of all living entities, for he sees all living entities as sons of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He does not claim himself to be the only son of God and allow all others to be killed, thinking that they have no soul. This kind of philosophy is never advocated by a pure devotee of the Lord. Suhrida Sarva Dehinam. A true devotee is the friend of all living entities. Krishna claims in Bhagavad Gita to be the father of all species of living entities. Consequently, the devotee of Krishna is always a friend of all. This is called ahimsa. Such non-violence can be practiced only when we follow in the footsteps of great acharyas. Therefore, according to our Vaishnava philosophy, we have to follow the great acharyas of the four sampradayas or disciplic successions. Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you.
Thank you. Let's discuss this paragraph by paragraph. So Srila Prabhupada starts with the first qualification. That is the mood of ahimsa. So then he says very nicely that one has to practice, must practice non-violence. And if you remember in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna also became a little bewildered by that thought process of ahimsa, and he doesn't want to do hinsa with the people. But there, Krishna's desire was to be done. Like Srila Prabhupada mentions in his lecture, that when Krishna says to do something, that is his supreme plan. And when we do that, that is not considered as hinsa. And in other way, we can also understand it, that hinsa which is being performed for upholding dharma, because they have tried their all the best not to do this, but then it has to be done. And that is by the will of the Supreme Lord. If it would be the will of Arjuna, then it doesn't qualify with that ahimsa characteristics. But here, that hinsa is also turned into a kind of ahimsa, because on a higher level, it is for the benefit of everyone that those kings should be killed. So here, Srila Prabhupada says the whole world is full of violence. So one should not have different attitude for different living entities, because Krishna says, Shruhudah Sarva Dehina. And another nature here says, Titik Shiva Karunika. We discussed this verse many discussion before when we were discussing third canto. These are the characteristics of a pure devotee of Lord. A pure true devotee is a friend of all living entities. No matter what living entity it is always there, always thinking about that. This is called ahimsa. And then such non-violence can be practiced only when we follow in the footsteps of great acharyas. So a great acharya means 4 sampradayas are there, Vaishnava sampradayas. So one should follow in that way. So that sampradayas are very important to follow, where to follow, what to follow. Because there is a verse which says sampradaya vihinasya mantra eva nishphala bhavet. Whatever mantra or whatever understanding we get, they don't have their potency if it is not in the sampradaya. Let's read the second paragraph.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Trying to advance in spiritual life outside the disciplic succession is simply ludicrous. It is said, therefore, Acharya one Purusho Veda, one who follows the disciplic succession of Acharyas knows things as they are. Chandogya Upanishad 6.14.2. Tad Vignanartham Sa Gurum Eva Vigachit. In order to understand the transcendental science, one must approach the bona fide spiritual master. Mundaka Upanishad 1.2.12. The word smritya is very important in spiritual life. Smritya means remembering Krishna always. Life should be molded in such a way that one cannot remain alone without thinking of Krishna. We should live in Krishna so that while eating, sleeping, working, and working, we remain only in Krishna. Our Krishna consciousness society recommends that we arrange our living so that we can remember Krishna. In our ISKCON society, the devotees, while engaged in making spiritual sky incense, are also hearing about the glories of Krishna or his devotees. The Shastra recommends Smartabhyaha Sadatam Vishnuhu. Lord Vishnu should be remembered always, constantly. Vismartabhya na jatuchit. Vishnu should never be forgotten. That is the spiritual way of life, smritya. This remembrance of the Lord can be continued if we hear about him constantly. It is therefore recommended in this verse, Mukunda charita griya siddhuna. Siddhu means nectar. To hear about Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita or similar authentic literature is to live in Krishna consciousness. Such concentration of Krishna consciousness can be achieved by persons who are strictly following the rules and regulatory principles. We have recommended in our Krishna consciousness movement that a devotee chant 16 rounds on beats daily and follow the regulatory principles. That will help the devotee be fixed in his spiritual advancement in life.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So then the second point comes, not the second point, but the following point. Trying to advance in spiritual life outside of disciplic succession is simply ludicrous. As I was mentioning, sampradaya vihinasya mantra eva nishpalam bhavet. So it actually, whatever we learn would not have its potency. That's why sampradaya is required. So it is also said, then Srila Prabhupada gives references from Upanishads saying, Acharyavan Purusho Veda. So only Acharyavan can understand about the Supreme Lord. And then Tad Vijnanartham Shadgurum Eva Vigachet. Prabhupada says this from Mundaka Upanishad, this particular verse, so many times in his lectures. Tad Vijnanartham. Jnana is science, or knowledge we can understand. The Vijnana is something with to understand transcendental, Paragyana or transcendental science. One must approach Gurum. Gurum evabhigachet. One has to go approach the Guru to get that. Then Srila Prabhupada mentions Smrityas, remembrance of the Lord. And then this is a very important instruction that we always get and that we should remember. Very instructive for us. Smartavya sadatam Vishnu, vismartavyo na jatuchit. Every time remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. That's what, from where it comes. This from this reference. Should never be forgotten. Lord Vishnu should be remembered always, constantly. That is the spiritual way of life, smritya. This remembrance of Lord can be continued if you hear about him constantly. That can be possible only if we hear about him constantly. Because more and more we are not in that association, not hearing about the Lord, then the other propensities within us take shape and come out. So more and more we hear, we immerse ourselves in Harikatha, in Satsanga, in association of devotees. Those propensities are kept at bay. When Guru Maharaj says that we have like a good dog and a bad dog within us, that kind of example he gives. And the good dog is promoted by these kind of activities, but the bad one promotes very easily. And then the good becomes quiet. So we have to activate our good propensities to say for ourselves, to help ourselves in the need, not the other propensities, which is very ready to help, always ready to help. But that help takes us to a diverted path. So it is therefore recommended in this verse, Mukunda Archita Argya. Mukunda Charita. So Acharita, whatever Mukunda has done and those activities one should remember. And then Sidhu means nectar or nectar of that. To hear about Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam is to live in Krishna consciousness. So that nectar is like remembering always and being always there is that nectar. Like nectar, when you say, then you are drinking nectar. But here with the remembrance, you are taking the nectar. All the time getting purified. All that nectar is actually keeping you alive. Always in Krishna consciousness. And how it can be achieved by rules and regulative principles. So then Srila Prabhupada says what we should do. We should chant 16 rounds daily, follow 4 regulative principles. And that will help us to go into the mode of goodness. And from that is the step from where we can go to the pure goodness, so that we can realize the Supreme Lord by the mercy of our Gurudev. And now let's read the other sections. This time 2 paragraphs.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead, Prabhu. Okay. It is also stated in this verse that one can advance by controlling the senses. By controlling the senses, one can become a Swami or Goswami. One who is therefore enjoying this super title Swami or Goswami must be very strict in controlling his senses. Indeed, he must be master of his senses. This is possible when one does not desire any material sense gratification. If by chance the senses want to work independently, he must control them. If we simply practice avoiding material sense gratification, controlling the senses is automatically achieved. Another important point mentioned in this connection is ananyateya. We should not criticize others' methods of religion. There are different types of religious systems operating under different qualities of material nature. Those operating in the modes of ignorance and passion cannot be as perfect as the system in the mode of good news. In Bhagavad Gita, everything has been divided into three qualitative divisions. Therefore, religious systems are similarly categorized. When people are mostly under the modes of passion and ignorance, their system of religion will be of the same quality. A devotee, instead of criticizing such systems, will encourage the followers to stick to their principles so that gradually they can come to the platform of religion in goodness. Simply by criticizing them, a devotee's mind will be agitated. Thus, a devotee should tolerate and learn to stop agitation.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So here, going further, then he tells about, Srila Prabhupada mentions about the quality of controlling the senses, or yamai. So then he mentions about Swami and Goswami. Go is senses and Swami is controller. So one who has this title must be very strict in controlling the senses. And because he is the master of senses, is Goswami. So this is possible when one does not desire any material sense. So like Prabhupada says, controlling the senses, if we simply practice avoiding material sense gratification, controlling the senses is automatically achieved. So that practice is required, and that practice comes with controlling this practice of controlling the senses. So this is a process of going through jnana and doing that, but it can also be done when one is focused on bhakti. So this thing is taken care of also. Then he says, then it says, the verse says, anindaya, no ninda, should not criticize others. So then Prabhupada also says later on that there are three divisions of the religion is also there. Dharma is also three types: sattvic, tamasic, and sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. But one should not criticize any system and try to encourage others to come to that level. Because if somebody starts criticizing, the mind get agitated, and when the mind get agitated, then one cannot do his things in a very proper way, and the mood also changes. So more and more we are in toleration and the agitation is stopped, more and more there is a chance of experiencing that moment wherever we are, when we are doing any kind of service. It's very difficult, but Prabhupada says it should be practiced, or Four Kumaras says it should be practiced. Let's read the last paragraph.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Another feature of the devotee is nirihaya, simple living. Niriha means gentle, meek, or simple. A devotee should not live very gorgeously and imitate a materialistic person. Plain living and high thinking are recommended for a devotee. He should accept only so much as he needs to keep the material body fit for the execution of devotional service. He should not eat or sleep more than is required. Simply eating for living and not living for eating, and sleeping only 6 to 7 hours a day are principles to be followed by devotees. As long as the body is there, it is subjected to the influence of climatic changes, disease, and natural disturbances, the threefold miseries of material existence. We cannot avoid them. Sometimes we receive letters from neophyte devotees questioning why they have fallen sick, although pursuing Krishna consciousness. They should learn from this verse that they have to become tolerant. Dvanda titikshaya. This is the world of duality. One should not think that because he has fallen sick, he has fallen from Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness can continue without impediment from any material opposition. Lord Sri Krishna therefore advises in Bhagavad Gita 2.14, Tam sitikshasva bharata. My dear Arjuna, please try to tolerate all these disturbances. Be fixed in your Krishna conscious activities. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. So before going to this paragraph, Prabhupada here in this paragraph says, while engaged in making spiritual sky incense, I was thinking what this is. Actually, devotees were in the earlier days were trying to make an incense and sell that along with the books. So that was named as spiritual sky. So that's why it's mentioned here. So that time they were also hearing the glories of Krishna Katha when they were making that. So yeah. Now coming back here, Nirihaya is simple living as we discussed. One thing to note, very instructive here, is that one like that Prabhupada mentions here, that if one is a devotee, he would not get sick. That doesn't happen because we are in this material world. We will experience those things if we are a devotee or not a devotee. But only difference would be when we are a devotee, we'll understand that these are the certain things which is there in this material world and which will happen, but one should tolerate it. So Krishna's message, like in 2:14, he says, like, Sitoshna Sukha Dukkada Agama Paino Nitya Tam Titikshastu Bharata. So he says, my dear Arjuna, please try to tolerate all these disturbances. So one should live very simply, because Prabhupada says that if one like goes beyond to do certain over endeavor to do certain things, then it also hampers one's spiritual life. So over endeavoring in places of work, when we try to do work more or do certain things more, will allow us not to be focused in our devotional routine. So we have to regulate ourselves there, if that is a possibility. So these are different qualities that has been mentioned, which is required for one to advance in spiritual life and spiritual consciousness. Just I wanted to read what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has to say. Only one liner he has to say for this verse. Rati appears by practices leading to peace, paramhamsya charyaya, and by relishing the sweet, excellent pastimes of the Lord according to the conduct instructed by Guru. He is talking about Rati and the attachment to the Supreme Lord. So how it can happen? By following the footsteps of the Paramahamsa and also thinking about the Lord. So those two things he's mentioning. So this is very instructive verse to know exactly what we knew. 4 Kumara says what we need for our advancement in spiritual life. And Srila Prabhupada, by adding must here, tells that should be developed within us. So I'll pause here. If there are any reflections, realizations, questions, corrections, they are welcome.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, my pranams to you. Jai Srila Prabhupada. I really like the verse, Prabhu. It is talking about both external and the internal aspects of what we should be doing when we are practicing. We are doing the sadhana bhakti, not only the yam, niyam, what we should be doing and what we should not be doing externally, but also talks about ahimsaya, for example, not only not eating meat, but are we really truly following the subtle ahimsa there, the ahimsa of the word, beautifully talked about not doing ninda because it affects our sadhana bhakti, however right we are. Beautifully talks about tolerance, beautifully talks about remembering Krishna always. Are we actually doing it when we are with ourselves? So beautifully explaining all the aspect of external and internal there. Thank you for taking this verse and explaining it. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Any other realizations? Any other take home? If not, I understand that this is very exalted qualities one should have, but one should start at some point. And Srila Prabhupada says must means definitely. We have to be very, and then 4 Kumaras also guiding us. As Mataji mentioned, it is not only telling us external things to do, also internally how to develop that. So, but the basic thing is if we can do our regulative principles, we chant 16 rounds, follow our Guru Varga, and have good association, these qualities slowly and steadily will be acquired, because our mind will get attached to these these very good qualities, and then we can also perform it very nicely. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining and then purifying this experience that we had for the last 30-40 minutes. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrind ki jai. Everyone,